Alright, so you're planning your game, right? You're looking at all the different ways that you could make your game. You have this grand idea, this grand plan to make the next big game on Roblox. But the issue? Well, you don't exactly know how to put this plan into words, and you don't even know if it's possible for you to make it. Well, this video is going to explain from the ground up how to take an idea all the way to reality, and to ensure that you do not make your idea and your concept too large where you can't even finish your game. So we're gonna plan it out from the start and we're gonna get going. So first of all, let's start with the base game idea. A fully fledged, can't wait to get started type of idea. Something that is incredibly motivating to you. Something that is really good. Something that you can picture in your mind and actually see in action. You can see yourself playing this game, or you can see somebody enjoying this game. And if your game idea is very strong, it's in your mind and it's clear and you can see it and you know what you want, that is a great start. If your base game idea is weak, your entire project is built on basically quicksand. So you need to make it strong and you need to make it compelling. This is the basis for your game. It is the seed that will grow into a fully fledged game. And that seed must be good in order to actually produce a good game. So, now that you have your game idea, what is next? Well, you need the game concept. This is where we dive deeper. So, first up is your high concept. This is your elevator pitch. This is what you'd say to somebody if you had only 30 seconds to sell them on your game. It's gotta be punchy, engaging, and unforgettable. But that's actually not enough. You also need a premise or a story, especially if your game actually has like a storyline and you want a narrative within your game, like a full-on story game. Well, even if it doesn't, you got to figure out why people should spend time in your game. Where is like everything coming from? You should have a bit of an idea of like, okay, where did the world come about in my game? Why does the world exist? If you can create a storyline behind like the maps and everything feels like it has meaning. It feels cohesive. It feels like it's deeper than what you're actually seeing at surface level. It's more than meets the eye. This adds substance to a game. This is necessary in order to make a great game concept, because it makes it so that players can see that there's more than just surface level thinking. You're a developer who cares. You're a developer who made something meaningful. And just like the real world, it leaves clues as to what happened in the past. So you need that premise. You need some sort of story behind your game, even if it's just rounds or whatever. So identify exactly why people should spend time, underline it, and make that central to your high concept. After you have a high concept, you can go ahead and get deep into the rest of your concept. So next, we talk about the unique selling points, or the USPs. These are the unique features, unique parts, unique ideas that you implement in your game. So every game has got features, right? But you have to determine what makes yours special. Is it the gameplay mechanics, the specific social aspects and social systems? Is it the amazing graphics? You need to nail down a core USP or 2 or 3 USPs and build your game out around those, because this is how you make something that people truly want to play. You'll see that most games on Roblox have a core USP or a set of core USPs that actually are the main things that the game is promoted on. For example, Pet Simulator X. Their USP is pets. Their USP is that unique pet system they have, their unique take on pets. This is a USP, and you need to have a very, very, very good one. This is like a pillar. These are the pillars that your game is built upon in order to make something unique. If you do not build on strong pillars, if you do not build on things that people actually want to look at, things that people want to experience within your game, you are setting up your game to fall apart. You're setting it up to fall apart like a poorly built house. See, you need core USPs that are super unique and super, super interesting to people. It's better to excel in a few aspects than to be average at everything else. So genre, strategy, features, these are the building blocks that make your game a cohesive unit. So know each of them inside and out and ensure that they align with your USPs and even build them out from your USPs. USPs are very key. They're not just something that you apply to some games and not others. USPs need to be in every game. Now, of course, when you make USPs, they might not be interesting at first. It's just a USP, right? It's just, say you add a new system in your roleplay game that allows people to not just customize their car, not just customize their house, but customize their car, customize the roads, customize everything. Well, if you do this, it sounds interesting, but you also need to frame this well. What do I mean? Well, you need to place a structure around the way that people look at this thing. This is selling. So we want to sell each of your unique selling points, right? Kind of makes sense. So you need to place a frame around your unique selling points and your core USP that you market on. And you need to place a frame around it that makes it interesting, that makes it so compelling that they want to play. You show this as fun. You show this in a way that makes them have a strong emotion to play your game. People are led by emotions to take action. So you must sell them on your game's USPs and your game as a whole. This is why USPs are so important. The next part of your game concept is the target platforms and the target customers. So let's be honest, Roblox is a platform that covers a lot of different people because there's millions of users, millions and millions of users. So who's your audience? Jesse Schell, author of The Art of Game Design book, says to think of yourself as the target customer, as the target player, as the person that you're trying to attract to your game, and then zoom out. What do they like? What don't they like? And you need to get in their shoes because your game's success depends on it. It depends on making sure that you look at your game from your player's perspective. If you're looking at your game from your shoes as the developer, you're gonna have certain biases, certain limits in the way that you view things that disallow you from actually making something that your player would like. See, the way that we view the world and the way that we view games, the way that we view anything, we have our own set of beliefs, we have our own set of frames, we have our own set of distortions on reality, we have our own set of deletions in reality. We don't see things for what they are. We don't see things correctly. We also delete things from the way that we see things because we as humans, we can only see a limited amount of things. We can only perceive a certain amount of things. So our brain has to block things out. So therefore we delete things from our reality. So knowing this and knowing the limited nature of our perception, we actually need to think quite deeply in order to get in somebody else's shoes and have the empathy of understanding your target player, which your target player can be you, as you know, we're all really similar in some ways. And you know, the games that you like might resonate with a lot of other people. So you can be a great target player, though if you have super specialized interests, you need to make sure that that actually matches up with a market that's large enough. You could be into games that barely anyone likes to play. So keep that in mind. But overall, perception is key. And you got to think in their shoes. Otherwise, you're missing the mark. You also need to look at the target platforms. So you need to look at what platforms you want your game to be on. That could be phone, tablet, console, VR, etc. So think about what platforms you want your game to be on from the start and make sure that you optimize to that. Now, let's get in the details of competitive and financial analysis. So you need to look at your competitors. You need to look at your rivals. What are they doing right and what are they doing wrong? Don't just emulate what others are doing. You need to innovate. You need to think of new creative things. This also goes back to our USPs, remember? You need to stand on the shoulders of the great games of the past and what they brought to the table, but you also need to bring your own edge to it. You need to bring your own uniqueness, because otherwise you're just gonna blend in with everyone else. So competitively, you need to make sure that your market's not too saturated, and if it is, you need to find ways to really innovate if you want to stay in that and really focus on those USPs. Now, the financial side is a little bit interesting because you can make a game for completely free if you're a solo dev or if you're working with friends. By the way, highly recommend networking in Smarty Devs below. If you want to network, you can actually join that right now. Link in the description. Shameless plug, but that is where you can actually start to learn and network and gain friends. But the first step is to provide value. So you need to actually give something in order to get something. This is the nature of networking, reciprocity. People naturally want to give back. But back to the financials, you need to look at exactly how much the game is going to cost you to make for each aspect. How much can you reasonably expect to earn off the game if you can make it a success? And you need to analyze the numbers and make sure that it works in your favor. Now, this is all highly speculative, and we don't want to be an analysis paralysis, but make a general look at this, because if you can actually estimate this stuff beforehand, you're going to be way better off. And you want to make sure that you're not doing a project that actually requires way too much money or won't make anything or won't make a profit. You don't even want to make those projects. A lot of people don't like to focus on monetization, but it's very key. You see, when you bring profit, that means that you were a success. That means that people resonated with your game enough to spend money. That's why monetization is so important to focus on. But people don't like to do it because they feel like they're making a cash grab. But really, you need to cash grab in a way. Still make a great game, that's the start. But if you don't focus on monetization, you aren't allowing yourself to consider the future. Your future self is going to want to fund larger games. Larger games now on Roblox take lots of money in many cases. I would know personally, I'm funding a lot of games that are kind of expensive. And you really need to realize that game development can get expensive as you try to make games and you try to include other people and hire. Now next, your team is the next crucial point. Something solo is good, but a tight and coordinated team is even better. So you need to ask yourself, are they experienced? Have they worked on notable games? Do they have the skills that complement yours? Write down the names of people who you want to hire, assign their roles, and then hit the ground running with action and project management. Next, so for the producer / the project manager, so leading a team is definitely not an easy task. You need the 4 E's. You need energy. You need to energize your team. You need an edge. You need to be able to say the truth even when it hurts. You need to be able to actually be able to say things even when people's feelings might be hurt or whatever. You need to be able to be somebody who can be that strong leader for your team. Then you need to be able to execute. Now, this was quoted in Jesse Schell's Art of Game Design from Jack Welch's book on. So, reviewing these, energy is self-explanatory. You know, you're the one who needs to bring the energy to the team. That's very key to leadership. If you're not engaged, who else is going to be? Then you need to energize. This is your ability to inject enthusiasm into everyone else in the team. Edge is all about making those tough calls. And execute is about converting your plans into reality. Be the 4 E's, live them, embody them as a leader, and you're going to be on a good track to being a great project manager or producer. Next is the minimum viable product, and aka the MVP. This is what we want to drive towards, especially as a solo developer. This should be a major vocabulary term in your arsenal. This is something you need to study deeply and think about deeply. This is basically the skeleton of your game. This is the absolute bare bones version. Strip away all of the complexities of your game and the and all the crazy ideas you have. What do you actually need to have a playable game? The very core things, the very core systems, very core maps. Strip away everything extra that is not necessary. Make a minimum viable product, a minimum viable game. Whatever is the lowest, simplest version of your game that is actually playable and enjoyable. Your MVP is so crucial, because if you build out a game with all of the bells and whistles and you don't test that and you actually finish it, well, you're not only is that unrealistic the first try, you're also setting yourself up for failure if those features don't resonate with people, if the way that you've actually built out your game doesn't resonate with people. See, your MVP is very important. So focus on the fun, the social aspects, and the monetization. An MVP can really deliver on all 3 if you plan it out well. And remember, the MVP isn't the end, it's just the beginning. But this is what you need to make. You can't go around making entire games right off the bat, because development is inherently a gradual process. See, when you're developing a game, develop is a word that basically means to build something over time, to improve something over time. If we're trying to make our entire game right at first, well, we're literally not even being a game developer. We're just a game maker, right? So you want to be a game developer. You want to develop your game, and you want to actually create a minimum viable product so that it can become a living, testable body, a living, testable game, something that you actually put out there, have people test, have people give feedback, and this will allow you to build out the rest of your game, but ensure that it actually aligns with what people want and that you don't get too far away from reality. The term pivoting is actually the next step. This is where you need to focus after the MVP. So pivoting is very, very crucial. Essentially, what you do is after you have a minimum viable product and you've tested it and you've played it with people, you know, jumped in the game a bit, play with some friends, play with some testers, whatever you've done, any kind of QA testing, any kind of testing that you have, now is the point to rough out the edges and build out the things that people want, and selectively build out something that still stays within your project scope. And project scope is just the scale as to which you can build out your project, the size that your budget and your team and the actual limitations of Roblox can allow. Stay within scope, the project scope that you're aiming for from the start, but build it out fully. Pivoting allows you to change on a moment's notice. You need to change if something's not working. You need to be prepared to pivot. All of this stuff applies to business as well, and it comes from business largely, and product development, because that's what your game is. It's a product, and when you're making games, you're selling not only your game, you're also selling everything within that game. You're selling the gameplay, you're selling the monetization, you're selling each game pass, each developer product. Everything is sold, and everything is different pieces of your game, which is the product. Now, that's exactly why you should treat it just like a product. It should be a creative piece of work. It should be something that has some passion put into it, but it should also be something that we treat as something that is designed to make money, designed to give a good experience. When we align ourselves with these external goals, we make sure that we actually make something that people want to play, and we ensure that we actually make something fun for a large amount of people. So any game that I've made, any game I've worked on, there's always been a large level of pivoting. I remember when we made in Jimmy games, we've made a lot of meme games. This is where a lot of the Robux I've made, a lot of the visits I've gotten have come from. And we built out, you know, this kind of garbage game called Sussy Imposter Land. You might or might not know it, but this game came out and it was trash, but people kind of liked it. This was basically our MVP. People played it, people kind of liked it, and we improved the monetization largely. We improved the gameplay, we improved the map slowly over time through pivoting. And now it's had over 8 million visits, I believe. 7 to 8 million visits on that game alone. So you can see how pivoting is so powerful and how a minimum viable product is so powerful. You can actually play Sussy Imposter Land Classic and you can compare it to the latest version, and you'll see the transformation from an MVP to a fully fledged game or product. You can also see this same exact thing happening with games across Roblox, including Jailbreak especially. I remember when I played Jailbreak, man, it was such a simple game. It had a prison, and it had a bank, and it had a city, and it had a simple few amount of cars that you could use. Now this game has frickin' helicopters flying around, planes, vroom. It's got motorcycles. Dude, it has everything, but they did not start this way. They had an MVP, they launched that really fast, they focused on that speed. It's also something with making an MVP, you need speed, and they got it out. This is an example of using a minimum viable product and pivoting at its finest. When we can use a minimum viable product, when we can make a minimum viable product, when we can actually allow that to become a living entity, our game, a living, breathing, changing organism, basically. When you can treat your game like that, even if it sounds weird, when you can treat your game like that, a changing thing, especially on Roblox, where updates can be released instantly, just like that, especially on Roblox, you really can understand how a minimum viable product and pivoting is so important. Jailbreak's such a good example of this because they made an MVP and then they pivoted, right? And their core USP, I believe at first especially, was the large map, the exploration, and the large scale take on a prison game. They've gone very hard on that, and they've expanded that through pivoting and through improving their game over time. And this has led to where it is today, a very polished game. And although it's not as large as it was, this continuous improvement in pivoting and alignment with their community has allowed it to stay at such a large scale. And this is exactly why you need to employ these strategies in your game. Make an MVP and pivot. Improve. Focus on that target player, that core ideal individual who you're trying to make your game for. Now, this is your game concept, and you can build out further a game design document from here. A game design document can include quite a lot more. It can go much more in depth on these specific details, but nowadays, especially on Roblox, a game design document is not fully necessary, at least in a fully fledged format, because again, your game is a completely changing, developing over time, living, breathing entity. And a game design document tends to be very rigid, and it doesn't allow for this change. And it also, if you stay within the bounds of that, you're limiting your creative potential. So you have to walk the line between a rigid GDD, game design document, and making something that actually changes and is creative. But you can do it. And a game design document, I would make a simple framework with all of these different elements, and I'll list them below in the description for you, and make that, but don't go too crazy on it. When you make a game design document, it is structured a bit different. It starts with your game concept, but then you have the story. Of course, not every Roblox game has story. It has social instead. So I guess you'd break down the social systems and how players interact in your game rather than the story. But if your game has a story, I'm also reading this from a book, which I'll tell you about at the end. You would have the outline, plot points, environments, script, non-interactive sequences, storyboards, and non-linear storytelling within the game, like players can make choices. Then, in the next section, you'd have the player character, PC. You would have its types, customization, abilities, progression, rewards, vulnerabilities, and their inventory. Then you'll have the non-player characters, NPCs, and also the boss characters within that. Next section of your game design document would be the features that you're going to employ, especially the unique ones. Then you would have the gameplay mechanics in the next section, and this includes pillars, repetition, and pacing. After the gameplay mechanics section, you'll have the level or scene descriptions. After that, you'll have the user interface, including the in-game interface and all the menus, and also the user experience that you have behind this user interface, because UX is very, very crucial to UI, very interlinked. And that all is how you make a game design document right there. From there, you can go even deeper, and you can really structure it how you want. Don't limit yourself. Game development is very much so something that changes, something that's free-flowing, something that requires your creativity, something that is not rigid and is not in a specific format. So I hope you've gathered that from this. This is a framework to make your game concept and to build that into reality and build your MVP and be able to pivot. But those things are only frameworks to work within in order to release your game efficiently and effectively, and also be able to make quick, rapid movements and make sure that you can actually change your game to be a success on a moment's notice. This requires speed. This requires a lot of hard work along the way. But if you can make that refined vision, make that MVP, and release it as simply as possible, as bare bones as possible, and then expand from there, or at least test like that, you're going to be in a very good spot, especially as a solo dev. It's very hard. Most people try to make too large of a game at first, and that is the wrong way to go about it. Now, after you've made your GDD, or a basic version at that, even if it's not really a GDD, as I've described it here, now you want to get into project management. So we talked about project management. It's more about leadership, using the 4 E's, which again are energy, energize, edge, and execute. So your ability to have energy, energize your team, have an edge and be able to make tough calls and tell the truth and say what needs to be said, and then finally execute that vision. These are actually going to be the keys to project management, among other studies that you can get into. I'm not the most actually skilled in this. However, my good friend and development partner, Myro, is actually very good at this. He has actually contributed to well over 400 million visits on games that he's been involved in, mainly through testing. He has a lot of experience. And he's also has a huge network of people who he knows. It's unbelievable. He knows so many different large developers, so many different YouTubers, and people. You wouldn't even believe what he's learned through this. And he's also influenced updates on large games that through people in his network, and he's accumulated over 140 million plus visits through his suggestions, through his ideas. And if this sounds good to you at all, if this sounds like somebody you want to learn from, well, I'm happy to say that he's a new professor in Scripting Secrets. And Scripting Secrets is a masterclass on where we go over and we study how to make viral Roblox games. We study how to script them. We study how to get your game out quickly. And he's actually got a new module in there. So if you're serious about Roblox development and you really want an all-in-one resource, you want to get your hands on that. He literally is aiming to build an empire on Roblox, and he's breaking it down inside exactly how he's doing it. So he has an eye for detail. If you want to look at that, you can click the link in the description. But yeah, so you have planned, you've worked through, and you've released your game now, right? If you follow this framework, don't go MIA, missing in action. You gotta promote it like there's no tomorrow. And I'm not gonna delve into it here. And you can click the video on screen to learn exactly how to promote your game. Also, for the books that I've referenced within this video, you can actually see some affiliate links to Amazon to get these books. They go very in depth on these topics, and I highly recommend them for any game developer and any Scripting Secrets member too. Highly recommend, and it supports the channel if you get the books there. So yeah, see you in the next video, and see you at the video on screen if you want to learn how to promote your game after you have, followed this framework.